This is Brighter Morning with Bo, and I am Bo Tiwari. And we have an internet problem with Sabrina, but we have her on the phone. And we'll try to put her photo up, and we will talk with her on the phone. I'm sorry we can't have a face-to-face conversation on the video conversation. But we will have the discussion. Good morning, Sabrina.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
No, thank you. I'm sorry we can't have you by video, but we'll continue the discussion over the phone, okay?
Yes, I'm happy to. Thank you.
All right. Tell me something about the organization you work for. You are the general manager, and it's a coalition of women's organizations that is dedicated to dealing with this question of violence against women. Tell me a little bit about that organization, how it works and what it does.
Thank you for the opportunity. So the coalition is actually an amalgam of organizations that works on issues relevant to domestic violence. That's how it started way back in 1985. So at the time, its founders, Diana Mahabir Wyatt and Radhika Seth, they were very concerned about the tremendous increase and the amounts of violence perpetrated against women, especially in the area of domestic violence. And at that time, there was actually hardly any organizations working on the issue. And they actually started by establishing two shelters, one in San Fernando and one in Port of Spain. So that is the genesis of the organization. And since then, the organization progressed and moved on to being maybe a single entity to embrace all other organizations working on the same issue, adopting a collaborative partnership approach because, of course, in unity there's strength. So the organization started off there and then moved over the years into moving from strictly establishing safe spaces for women to go to or victims to go to with their children into other areas. So we now function and work under broader areas of programming to include, of course, our core services, which is the provision of psychosocial support for victims coming to us. And by the psychosocial support services, we mean, we provide clinical therapy, counseling, case management services, and legal support, initial legal support. And then apart from that, we also engage in advocacy and legislative work, meaning that we pursue policy and that would be made available and that would work for the betterment of victims. So we would have worked and put in a lot of work around legislative work, lobbied for the amendments to the Domestic Violence Act, made contributions to the Sexual Harassment Bill, worked with other organizations under Sex Offenders Registry, and more recently we worked together with the Trinidad and Tobago Chamber of Commerce to introduce a domestic violence workplace policy. So that's some of the work we've been doing around legislation. And of course we continue to lobby, always working with the state, the government agencies, the gender ministry, social development, etc., for continuous improvements. We work with the police and healthcare workers to ensure that, as first responders, they respond in the way that they need to when victims make report or go to them. And then, of course, we engage in a lot of sensitization, education, capacity building, training. So primarily those are the areas that our work revolves around.
Yeah, you got involved in this kind of social consciousness work on behalf of women very early in your life, I would say. What is it that prompted you in this direction, and why did you feel the need to give yourself so wholeheartedly to this kind of mission?
Yeah, that's a very good question, and it started way back for me as a little girl when I noticed all the violence around me, and I was impacted by by what I saw and what I experienced in my surroundings, and that did not sit well with me, even as a little girl, and I made a vow quite early in my life that I would spend my entire time working, to change this. And then when I was a teenager, I was heavily involved with the Presbyterian Church. And as part of my youth group experience, we had youth camps. And, we always engaged in activities, that would help us to develop as young people. And then I was heavily influenced by the head of the Presbyterian Church, or the Theological College at the time, Reverend Dr. Idris Hamid, and persons like Dean Nolly Clark. So they were pretty instrumental in my formative years in terms of helping me to understand the need to give back, the need and to understand the mission and the importance of working with communities and developing a community response to any societal issues. So that was it for me, and then I started, and then I just moved in and was able to do that work in many capacities over my lifetime.
Yeah, and you're still quite young, and I want to commend you on what you've been able to achieve personally in terms of your mission, and also what you've been able to achieve and continue to achieve with the coalition. But tell me something about this issue of domestic violence. How prevalent is it now? And you were prompted by the knowledge and experience around you of domestic violence in an earlier time when you were much younger. And is the domestic violence now, has it increased in terms of prevalence? And secondly, has it intensified in terms of the extent of violence?
Right. So those are very good questions. And certainly the prevalence of domestic violence in Trinidad and Tobago is very high. So, I mean, many people would be aware that a 2018 survey conducted in Trinidad and Tobago revealed that 1 in every 3 women have experienced at least one form of intimate partner violence in their lifetime. So that's pretty high, and that's just the prevalence, So it means in reality, the real figures may be higher. Secondly, I would not say that there is a decrease from the time that, when I grew up in the environment of violence. What I would say is that we are now finding more and more people reporting, and there's not necessarily a decrease. What I can also see is that the forms of violence, of course, it's been intensified, and of course, it's broadening. So persons now have access. In the past, instances of violence perpetrated against women would have mainly been through maybe chopping, strangulation, etc. But now you have the use of guns. So guns are now being used, as weapons. So you have a broader spectrum of weapons being used and the methods of killings of women. As well, we're now moving to the spectrum of online and cyber violence. And just last night, I sat in a UN forum where we discussed this. Violence in the private sphere as well as in the public sphere, and of course now moving into that situation where persons are experiencing violence online in many ways. So it's been broadened in that way. But of course, it's definitely been intensified as we function and as we live under the COVID the COVID restrictions. So we've had since last year in 2020, leading up to now, persons coming to us. And of course, with the migrant situation, we've also had persons reaching out to us. As a matter of fact, just this morning, I received a long text from a person detailing, the horrendous experiences she's been having with respect to domestic violence. So it's coming to us in many forms, from many quarters, and it's becoming more complicated. Of course, relevant to how it's manifested under the COVID-19 restrictions, more and more perpetrators are at home because, of course, during the lockdown period with the curfew and so on. And then, of course, persons are losing their jobs, so they are now at home. And when you're at home and when perpetrators are triggered because of, external factors, jobs, stress, etc., then and there are no outlets vis-a-vis going to the playgrounds, going to hang out with friends, going to having a social life. It means that the extent and the intensity of the violence will become more. So those are some of the ways and those are some of the patterns and that we've been seeing over the past 2 years.
Well, I mean, you have seen a lot of this, and you have experienced through the people that you help a lot of the violence and seen the patterns of violence, and you are seeing it exacerbated now by the COVID lockdown situation and the fact that you have partners at home a lot of the time before either both or one of them would go to work, so that there'd be a separation for a number of hours during a 24-hour day. But I want to ask you a hard question for which there can never be one answer. Mm-hmm. But I'm only asking you because of your experience and your knowledge and seeing so many cases. What is it in your view that makes a man feel that he can beat up a woman and that is okay?
Right. So there are many theories on this, and of course the explanation that we hold on to and we use lies with our belief systems and our ideology, and that we grew up with, and that we continue to hold dear to. So, my view was expressed last night in the forum. I think it lies in ideology, in the dominant ideology that we hold dear, and by this I mean. This ideology, I am talking about the location of both man and woman and woman in the context of the ideology. So we have an ideology which says to us, okay, men are supposed to behave in a particular way, women are supposed to behave in a particular way. In this dominant ideology, it says to us, men are supposed to be protectors, head of households, take care of the family, etc., etc. Women are supposed to be, nurturers, providers of the family, take care of the family in another way, the socialization aspects, etc. So there are defined rules for both men and women, and in those rules, men are placed at the helm. So if men are placed at the helm, it means that the thinking is that because I'm at the helm, the relations are unequal, meaning that at the helm, I am superior to you. One is superior, one is inferior. So this unequal relationship will result also in unequal power relation. So it's based on a relationship of power where one understands being head as being in charge of as and having power over of. That understanding is reflected in the way I treat you, and because of our history and everything else, our history of violence and how we understand discipline, it's interpreted to mean that in order to have control over you, in order to in order to exert this power, then I have the right to use violence as a means. And we do it as children when we have children. So in order to keep our children in line, in order to discipline them, we use violence. So it is used as a means of emphasizing that I am in control, I am the one, I am the head, I am the lead. So it's used as a way of maintaining power and control in that relationship and to keep that person in line. So it's all about, how relationships are perceived and understood. And of course, because we hold dear to that, and because we've been taught that, starting with at the level of children and so on, it's passed on from one generation to the next generation as the ideal.
Yeah, you think we nurture, perpetrate, and proliferate violence in this society from the institutions? I mean, we've had a savage history of brutality in slavery, in enslavement of people, in the indenture system, and as we evolved out of that, the pattern continued in the home. You had beating in the schools.
Yes.
I mean, do you think that the way the way we live is a violent way, you think, and that in a sense legitimizes violence in the society, and then the power relations, of course, determine whether you take advantage of women or children? Do you think, am I being too simplistic in talking about it in that way?
No, I think we need to look at it in this context, and we are strong advocates of looking at the way violence at violence itself, and violence not only in the context of our history, because we are colonies of conquest, and we have a history of violence, and even as persons coming here, whether as slaves or indentured laborers, we've come with those experiences of violence, and it continues. But then we also have to look at the role of our culture, of religion, and so on in the violence, and how it's perpetuated, and how maybe the various relevant to religion as well, how the doctrine, how the theology maybe, and I want to say misinterpreted, or interpreted to mean that, that male as the preferred or the privileged one equates violence and having, because of the privileged position of the male in the doctrine and the patriarchal systems that's ingrained in the teachings, we have to start to unpack that and look at that and look at the many ways in which even religion and religious belief systems perpetrate those beliefs. The religious teachings, for example, reject divorce, frown upon separations and things like that, even in instances of violence. What we hold dear and what we value in culture, we value a nuclear family or a family, that stays together no matter what. So although we live in a modern civil society, there are still beliefs systems which tells us this, if you get married and you go to your husband's place or your husband's home, then you must stay there for life, and no matter what you experience, you stay there and you stick it out, because that is what marriage is all about. So I know I'm probably kind of jumping from one thing to the next, but it's so complicated. It's a number of factors that all culminate to make this issue as complicated as it is. So it comes from all kinds of fronts that culminate to present a scenario and a behavior which is considered to be archaic and unacceptable, but is still intrinsic and very much a part of life as we know it today, and it shows and it's reflected in the numbers of persons and the numbers of women being killed, 25, at least an average of 25 per year, as a result of domestic violence. And actually in 2017, there were 43 women killed as a result of domestic violence. And then we are not talking about the many other ways, women, victims, men as well, walking around as hurt people, as traumatized people because of the other forms of violence, the psychological, the emotional, financial, etc. We have so many people out there walking around, going to workplaces, functioning, with experience of domestic violence and gender-based violence.
All right. I'm going to ask you two questions, and you can reflect on it because we're going to break for some commercials. But the two questions are this. In a home, how does a father justify that you have a son and a daughter, or boy children and girl children, and you want to create the conditions in which the boy embraces the traditional notion of manhood, and the child, the girl child or the girl children are either conditioned or expected to be submissive and to think of themselves as less. I want you to reflect on that for a minute, and we'll come to that. And the second question I want you to reflect on is, given all these complicated factors that you talk about that have really gotten us to the point where we are a violent society, we are a male chauvinistic society, we are a society in which power relations create the conditions in which brutalization of the female is accepted. Given all of that, how do we get out of this? So the first thing is about the girl-child, boy-child relationship in the home, and the second one is how do we get out of it? This is Brighter Morning with Bo. We are talking with Sabrina Baksh, and we are talking about domestic violence and violence against women. And we break now for commercials, and we come back in a minute.
Welcome to Lifetime Solutions, where you can trust your roof to us. Our services include custom fabrication, steel framing, roofing installation, on-site roll forming, roofing maintenance and services. Call 223-ROOF or 223-7663 for a quote today, or visit our website www.lifetimesolutionst.com. Lifetime Solutions. You can trust your roof to us. Call 223-ROOF or 223-7663 for a quote today, or visit our website www.lifetimesolutionstt.com.
As businesses adapt to the new normal, let Magic Mist take care of your cleaning and sanitization needs with our COVID-19 BSCAI internationally certified technicians. With over 43 years of protecting the health of our nation, you can trust us to ensure your building remains safe, healthy, and functional. Give us a call today at 638-6675 or 332-5522. Magic Mist Services Limited, your total facilities management solutions provider.
Join me, Dr. Shivan Mahabir, on The Present Mind, where we look at common mental illnesses and help you to live a happier, healthier life. We are on MCTV, Tuesdays 1:30 p.m. and Thursdays 1:30 p.m. See you then.
Yeah. I asked you two questions very quickly. I'll just reiterate what they are. What is it that allows a father, who must love both daughter and son, to create a situation in which the girls are conditioned in one way and the boys differently? And secondly, how do we get out of this complicated situation in which violence is so dominant, power so abusive, and abuse of women accepted as okay?
Yeah. So to respond to the first question, so the father within that context, it's only reflecting a behavior which was learned. So we're talking about a social construct here. So behavior is learned. So both the father and the mother, they would have come into the family situation with a social construct. So the social construct which we taught to them, that we talked about earlier, would have said to them, this is the way the father is supposed to behave. So this is the way that the mother is supposed to behave. So of course for them, it's what we call normalized, and this is normal behavior for them in the context of the family situation. Again, it must have been, taught to them starting, from the religious institutions, then carried on into the education system and all the different institutions tasked with, with learning. Of course, the family is the first place of learning. And that learning for the family starts, even, before the baby is born. So our understanding of what a boy or what a girl is begins there. So we start to prepare the moment the baby is on the way. So, we do things like, so very, very first, so when the mother, the woman is pregnant, the first question that people ask is, and they want to know, is what is the gender of the baby, or what is what baby you're having. And then in some cultures, the boy is always the privileged one. So I'd like to have a boy first. The first child must always be the boy child, and then the boy, because the boy has to carry on the legacy, the boy has to carry on the family's name. So the boy is the privileged one. So starting from even when the mother becomes pregnant, already there are clearly defined expectations and rules even before the baby is born. So the mother begins to prepare, and the father as well. So if it's a baby, if it's a baby girl, then automatically pink things will be, the decorations in the room will be pink. If it's a boy, it's blue. If it's a girl, chocolates will be given out. If it's a boy, cigars will be. So there are certain traditions and that go with whether the child is either male or female. Now, one of the latest things that I've seen popping up all over this place is something called a gender reveal. in that big celebrations and popping of balloons and activities to break the news to the family and friends, what baby. But therein lies a misinterpretation. So there is a difference between sex and gender. We are born either biologically male or female with certain body parts. Of course, we know that we have instances where even that is changing, and there may be some complexities about the sex of the person, and there are some discussions, and there are instances where that may be challenged. But certainly, generally, we're born either biologically male or female. However, what we have taught and what we learn as how we need to function and how we interpret what is either a boy or girl, a man or a woman, it's taught to us. It's learned behavior, and that is what we refer to as gender. So that's why in these times, we have persons now having the opportunity to say, which gender do you identify as? So, do you identify as being male or female, based on behavior and how you see yourself? So with that understanding, and when the child is born into a family, of course, with the understanding that the father have and the interpretation that the father has, the father will say, listen, say to the mother, well, because of what I've learned and what I've internalized and what is normal for a family, I want a boy first. And then we have instances where if the woman does not have a boy child first, then she may be seen as inadequate, and she may be labeled as an inadequate mother, and the blame is put on the female. You cannot give me a boy child. You cannot make all kinds of things we find happening if the preferred child, which is the boy child, is not delivered. So, the man, of course, within this context, may want, in the main, the preferred child, which is the boy child. And of course, in the instances where there are two children, coming back to the question, a boy or a girl, then coming with the understanding that the boy must carry on the legacy, the boy will inherit the property, the boy, will lead the next generation of the family name and so on. And the girl will, is to be prepared for marriage, because that's the role of the girl child, to be prepared, for going into another family, so that we prepare the girl to be the ideal mate or candidate for marriage, for some other person's son. So we, come in, and with that thinking, then automatically and without even knowing it, we are preparing our boy child for a certain role and our girl child for a certain role. And very often, the children in a home as well, they live what they see. That's the normalization of the violence.
I will have to intervene here because we're coming so close to the end.
Yes.
And I don't want you to leave without saying how we get out of this.
Yes.
I note your career and your involvement in this area, and I know that you are into peacemaking, conflict resolution, and so on. And how do we get out of this situation of violence in the culture, domination of the male, and then brutalization of the female, and finally, and a kind of acknowledgement, if not acceptance, well, these things happen, it's okay. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, so, it's fundamentally, we're talking about changed behavior. It's a behavioral issue. And in the same way we learn, we can unlearn or we can relearn. So, in the area of the job market, we talk about retooling, we talk about, broadening our understanding and etc. Whilst, the laws and the policies, remain a critical part of it, we boast of having one of the strongest set of legislation in the region with regard to violence against women. But it's not implemented. It's not. It does not work for people, and we boast of being a modern society with modern thinking, with highly educated, certified people. However, fundamentally, even with all of that and all those gains we have made, we still remain with the fundamental issue of the high amounts of violence. And why is that? It has to do with the way we perceive the things. It has to do with what we are taught. It has to do with our behavior. So fundamentally, we're talking about changed behavior, a rethinking of what we teach and how we interpret, and respect for each other, how we view discipline, and thinking about alternative ways of dealing with conflict, with dealing with situations in which we have no control over, and looking at self and how one can change self. So I know it sounds unreachable. I know it sounds maybe far-fetched, but it's what's required. It's the only way we can deal with it. All of the other things that we can think about to make women safe, safe transportation, taking self-defense classes, arming women with pepper spray, giving guns, etc., providing people with guns. Those may work, but those are immediate fixes. If we intend to, eradicate this thing completely and really and truly deal with it, we have to deal with it from the root cause. And the root cause remains that of, women's equality. Men and women having respect for each other, men and women seeing each other as equal partners and equal beings. And it is only when we get to that state, then we can truly eliminate this violence.
Yeah, the root cause is culture and socialization, and a basic acceptance of the inequality of male and female. And unless we address that, I don't think we can solve the problem. And it's hard to solve. You've got to solve it at the level of the home and the school to begin with, to be able to deal with this. Look, Ms. Baksh, Sabrina, I want to thank you so much for this conversation this morning. I'm sorry that we weren't live by video so that people could see you. They did see your photos, so they know who you are, but I'm sorry we didn't have a face-to-face conversation. But on another occasion, I want to tell you that I have really been inspired by this conversation with you, and I want to thank you very much for taking the time.
Yeah, it was my pleasure to be here, and I'm available, anytime.
All right. Brighter Morning with Bo. You have just seen Sabrina Baksh, and we talked to her about domestic violence and violence against women, a very, very enlightening conversation. And this is Brighter Morning with Bo. I am Bo Tiwari signing off so Andrew Chan can read the news.